guys? The Bench Buddies are back with our college football playoff rankings, and this will be our final rankings before all the bowl games. And, we will have another one after all the bowl games. But before we get into it, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Get us to 200 subscribers, where we will be doing an autograph item giveaway. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button to be entered. But we will talk about who dropped, obviously North Carolina, and they are in our others receiving votes. But Ty, out of all these teams here, so which one of these teams is the most surprising to see on this list? Or, which one could even jump into the top 25 for our final rankings?
I would say Ole Miss is surprising in that they were disappointing this season. I think they had a lot of expectations after a top 10 season last year. Just didn't quite get what they wanted out of Jackson Dart, and the defense just was not great in a couple games. So 8-4, I think, is definitely a disappointment for them. And you could throw North Carolina in there too as a disappointment for this season.
And then starting at 25, we have Cincinnati just dropping back one, just because it didn't get into that championship game last week. But their question is, how is Kerry Coombs going to coach this team up in the bowl game in a few weeks here? Obviously Fickell's departure, and now the transfer portal is going to be pretty much free agency of college football at this point. So Cincinnati, it's going to be interesting to see how they transition next year into the Big 12. And what worse time, losing your best head coach you've ever had in program history. And the Bearcats might be hurting going into next year.
At 24, we got UCF. Could not beat Tulane twice, unfortunately. I know it's hard to beat a team twice, but really got dominated there in that American Championship. This week they are in their bowl game, they get Duke. And I think if they can win that, it's still a successful season. Any season you win 10 games, that's something to hang your hat on. But I think they will be disappointed. They didn't come away with that American Championship. And they also had two pretty disappointing losses this year. So they definitely could be looking at an 11-2 record. But either way, they're going in the right direction under Gus Malzahn.
23, we got South Carolina, a very surprising team to be ranked at this point in the season, to say the least. But they get a tough bowl game with Notre Dame, and I think it's going to be a great bowl game between those two because Notre Dame, they didn't really exceed expectations, but I don't think you can write them off as a failure of a season. For South Carolina, I think they did exceed expectations. They were more a 5-7, 6-6 team. Finished 8-4, beat two really good teams down the stretch. But if you want to talk about the bowl game, it's going to be on Spencer Rattler. Is he going to actually play, or is he going to enter the draft? Or there's lots of question marks surrounding him. And I think if he doesn't play, then it's going to be a struggle for this Gamecock team because he has pretty much been the team on offense this year. And the defense, well, that's just been a different story, giving up a lot of points and yards and whatnot. And the Notre Dame running game is good as well. So the Gamecocks, good for them to be ranked here late in the season.
At 22, we have Texas going into a bowl game against Washington. I think they really need that win. It seems like Texas has had a lot of seasons where it looked like they're going in the right direction and, just couldn't keep the momentum going. They need this bowl win to build at least a little bit of momentum in that program. They have Quinn Ewers, you would think, coming back. You never know with the transfer portal, but he's supposed to come back next year. So I think that's a really good piece for them to build around. And if they can get a 9-4 season this year, not quite what they wanted, but I think it's still going to give them some momentum going into next season.
At 21, we got Troy Trojans joining our rankings for the first time this year. 11-2 record, demolishing Coastal Carolina in their conference championship game. So they deserve to be ranked finally. And what's crazy to me is that's their 10th straight victory over Coastal Carolina. So they have had their number for as many years, it feels like. And now they get UTSA, a ranked matchup of the non-power fives, which will probably be one of the better games of bowl season before the New Year 6 games. I expect it to be a very close one as well. So a battle of these two teams that you're going to see next here that are both 11-2.
And at 20, we have those UTSA Roadrunners. Remember, they lost that game in triple overtime to Houston in week one. If they come away with that, they might be playing USC in the Cotton Bowl instead of Tulane. So they say it's a game of inches. That's what it was for UTSA this year. But still, 11-2, dominated the Conference USA championship. So very successful season for UTSA. And they could get to 12 wins if they can beat Troy. And this is a team who's only been FBS for 10 or 11 years. So they're definitely moving in the right direction. And I think if they could get that 12th win, they could be a really dangerous group of 5 team next year.
At 19, we got UCLA staying put. Their big thing is Dorian Thompson Robinson. Can he get them to 10 wins this year? And I think it's a very successful year for him. Even at 9-3 right now, even if they go 9-4, I think it's a good year for him. Really kind of flew under the weather this year. They ranked as high as 7 for us this year. So they did hit their stride at one point in the season, but struggled at going down the stretch. But they do get a fairly easy matchup against Pittsburgh in a bowl game. I mean, I don't know if it's easy, but it's a favorable one for sure for these Bruins. So they could get to 10 wins and finish out their season.
At 18, we have Notre Dame. Big matchup for them against South Carolina in the bowl game. Really big for both teams. And I think there's mixed emotions coming out of this season for them. Obviously, started in the top 5, which they were way overranked to start the season. But either way, when you start in the top 5 and you go 8-4, there's going to be some disappointment. But the way they were, 3 games into the season, coming off that Marshall loss, I think they would have taken 8-4 then. And the way they finished the season, got that blowout win over Clemson. There's definitely some momentum here under Marcus Freeman. I think Drew Pine entering the transfer portal is a little curious, given that he was probably going to be the starting quarterback next year. So we'll see where they go in the transfer portal, assuming they do bring somebody in.
At 17, we got Oregon State, who gets a matchup with Florida in a bowl game. The defense is going to be tough trying to stop Anthony Richardson, but the quarterback of Ben Gulbranson could lead this Oregon State Beavers team to 10 wins. And, even for our standards, I think another team that we really didn't see coming out of the Pac-12. Pac-12 was really good this year, but they were almost too good where they beat up on each other just a little too much. And I do like where the direction of the Pac-12 is going, but unfortunately, obviously we're stealing some of their teams from, going to the Big Ten, but it could open the door even more for the Pac-12 to possibly get in the playoff. Obviously now with the 12 team, there will be a Pac-12 team that gets in, but it'll just be kind of where if they're, one of the 4 of the 5 Power 5 conferences that's good. But that's a long time down the road. We got to talk about these Beavers and a very successful year for them at 9-3 right now.
At 16, we have LSU. I think they would look at this as a success in year 1 under Brian Kelly, but definitely left some they definitely had some performances that they're going to regret here as we get to the end of the year. I think that Texas A&M game is a real head scratcher for them. If they can get to 10 wins here in the bowl game, I think Brian Kelly's definitely going to have them going in the right direction. We'll see if Jaden Daniels comes back, if he's the starter next year. I think he definitely had a solid year, but had some subpar performances. So we'll see what happens at the quarterback position, but I think this team will be just fine come next season.
15, we got Florida State, and they're going into their bowl game with a 5-game winning streak, kind of out of nowhere if you really think about it, because a lot of people wrote this team off once they lost to Wake Forest, and then lost again, and then lost again. And here they are, back in it, and 9-3 can get another 10-win season. And if you really like ACC football, then you're going to be surprised at how many, I think, teams are going to win bowl games here in the ACC against some good teams. I think Florida State is going to be a team that gets a bowl win against Oklahoma because they have struggled mightily this year. But Florida State has shown more consistency than complacency. So with that being said, give me Florida State to win the bowl game and finish with 10 wins this year.
At number 14, we got Oregon. I think it will be a disappointing season for them when they look back on it, especially losing in that last game, blowing the 21-point lead to their arch rival Oregon State. That's got to be a disappointment. And obviously, they were set up to go to the Pac-12 championship. And then when you see how USC plays in that game, I think they will look back at this season thinking they should have won the Pac-12. But they get Oregon they get North Carolina in their bowl game, a chance to get to 10 wins. And I think this defense is set up to really limit Drake May. He's made some, young player mistakes late in the season. So I think Oregon can feast on those. And Bo Nix should be fully healed for that game, assuming he plays in it, where Oregon should be the favorite to win that game.
13, we got to ride the wave with Tulane. 11-2 has earned a New Year's Six bowl matchup with USC. And this is their first New Year's Six bowl game since 1939. Yes, almost 100 years ago, this Tulane team was dancing in a New Year's Six game. But we'll talk about this year's team. Tajay Spears has been an absolute dog for this Green Wave team. Michael Pratt has been exceptional as well. And these guys are a fun team to watch. So I think this could be a very high scoring game because USC's defense, well, they get exposed almost every single game. And what better matchup to give them with a high scoring Tulane team that has a pretty solid defense? It's very underrated in the country as well. But stopping Caleb Williams is going to be a whole different story for this Green Wave team. But they do have almost 3 weeks to prepare for this game. So yeah, I expect them to throw everything they can find in the playbook at them. And, just because I think it's a good story, maybe Tulane will walk away with this victory here. Obviously they have a lot more to play for than USC does at this point in the season. And I think it's just a success to see that, now that the 12-team playoff is officially in place, a team like Tulane more than likely would have got in the playoff just because of how good they played this year.
At number 12, we have Washington dropping a couple spots just because of other teams winning around them. But unbelievable first season under a new head coach. And remember, Washington was not good at all last year, didn't even make a bowl game. So I think Kalen DeBoer, he already got an extension, well deserved. He's done a great job here in year one. And I think this program is going to do a lot of really good things under him. And I think they could be the team that takes over the torch in the Pac-12 once USC and UCLA lose or leave. I think it's going to be them and Washington battling it out, and or them and Utah. And this team, with Michael Penix at quarterback, if he can come back next year, they're going to be really dangerous. So if they win that bowl game over Texas, I think you really got to watch out for Washington next year.
At 11, we got Kansas State, and you can thank them moving up because they were the first to dethrone TCU in overtime. And I think this was more on TCU kind of squandering it away, even though Kansas State really wanted to throw this one away late in the fourth. But they came up with the goal line stops on 3rd and 4th down in overtime. And obviously they walked away with game-winning field goal right down the center. Deuce Vaughn had a great game. Will Howard played great as well. They get a matchup with Alabama, and who knows who's going to be playing for Bama because normally they're playing in the college football playoff and all their guys are playing. But at this point, it's just a regular bowl game, doesn't mean as much. And who's going to play? Is Bryce Young even going to play? That's the big question mark surrounding that. So if he doesn't play, maybe the momentum shifts a little bit pregame to Kansas State. But either way, whatever way this goes for Kansas State at 10-4 or 11-3, it's a very successful year, obviously, because they won the Big 12. And they obviously weren't expected to be one of the top contenders either to win the Big 12.
At number 10, we have USC, the big loser of the weekend, getting blown out and missing their shot at the college football playoff. They were in a win and you're in situation. They would have been number 3 if they won. And, I think it was the worst display of tackling I've maybe ever seen by a defense. I know they're just kids, but wow, it was a lot of missed tackles, a couple long touchdowns where guys just had Utah players wrapped up and somehow they broke free. So I think Lincoln Riley's going to have his work cut out for him to fix that defense moving forward. Obviously, Caleb Williams coming back next year, it's going to be a lethal offense, but they're going to have to figure out the defense. Otherwise, that's going to hold them back again. And you saw that with Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, where the defense was an issue. So as long as they can get that figured out, they should be right back in the mix next year. But easier said than done after that performance last week.
At 9, we have those Utah Utes who went in there and beat USC for the second time this year. So they're the Pac-12 champions. They held USC to 56 rushing yards. Caleb Williams did pretty good, but held him in check for his standards. And I think the big storyline here is they outscored USC 30-7 in the second half. And, USC has been known to be a second half team and really pull away and put up a lot of points. So credit to the Utes for limiting USC and ripping their chances away from the playoff. But now they get rewarded with Penn State in a bowl game in the Rose Bowl, which should be a very good game. I don't know which way to lean. Early on in this, bowl season, I guess you could say, because Utah last year, they were in the same game, was a great game against Ohio State, but I think it'll be a little different this year, different result for them as well.
At number 8, we have Clemson. I think it's going to be the season of what ifs. I said it last week. If they benched DJ and Klubnik went in and had a really good game, they would be looking back at this season scratching their heads, and that's exactly what happened. They dominate North Carolina, win the ACC. I think if they beat South Carolina last week, didn't take that 1-point loss at home, they would have had a very strong argument to get in over Ohio State as that fourth team. So, I know DJ has had his ups and downs, but he's just had some rough performances down the stretch where I think they should have pulled the plug a little earlier, especially with their playoff hopes on the line. So now with him in the portal, you're going to get another look at Cade Klubnik in the bowl game against Tennessee in the Orange Bowl. And I think that sets up to be a very favorable matchup with Clemson because remember, Hendon Hooker is out Tennessee, and that's a very up and down defense for the Volunteers. So still a chance for 12 wins for Clemson and another conference championship. So still a successful season. Disappointment from their standards.
Then at 7, we do have those Tennessee Volunteers. And, obviously you mentioned it just a second ago with no Hendon Hooker. Is Joe Milton actually going to step up and play well against a good Clemson team? I don't think so, just because, well, we've seen enough from him in his early career at Michigan. And then, when they had their last game of the year, just isn't really there. He could have been, he's a good what if, I think, surrounding this team. And it's another what if Hendon Hooker didn't get hurt and they only lose to South Carolina, and maybe they squeak in the playoff just like Ohio State did. It really just is a year of what if. And I know that a lot of people are saying this is a great year for just the 4 teams, but I think it would have been an excellent year to have the 12-team playoff implemented, because you got a team like Tennessee here that is going to go in struggling, don't have their normal quarterback, could pull off the upset against a few teams. Then you got Clemson, who really needs to be in there, really should play some struggling football with a new quarterback. And so lots of new stories I think that you'll see in the 12-team playoff. But for this year, it should be a very good game against Clemson.
At 6, we have Alabama, another year where they missed the playoff their second time in 4 years. And I'm not going to say the program is on a downward spiral, but they haven't been that dominant force over the last few years that we've seen in the past. I know they won that national championship in 2020, but they still only have one championship now in the last 5 years. So I think it's definitely going to be some question marks coming out of there. And assuming Bryce Young to the NFL, it's going to be Jalen Milroe's team next year. And we've seen his running ability, but we haven't seen much of him as a passer yet. So I think there's going to be a lot of question marks going into the season for Alabama next year, more than they've had in a long time. So I think we'll learn a lot about their depth in this bowl game because I'm assuming a bunch of guys are going to be sitting out for them. But, definitely a disappointment, even if they win the game. Obviously, Alabama is championship or bust, and no championship this year.
And at 5, yes, probably our most controversial topic of the year, we got Penn State at 5. And the media isn't telling you what you should be hearing here. Maybe it is a hot take for us here, but we're both Michigan fans, and that means we're going to show some love to the Big Ten as well. The 2 losses they have were to 2 teams in the college football playoff. Why is no one talking about that? The 2 and 4 seeds are the team this team lost to, and their resume was just thrown out the door, I guess. Maybe they don't have the strongest of schedule, okay, but they still put up 10 wins on the board and didn't get to a conference championship. If you look at the other stat, their closest win is by 3. Then all the other wins have been 2 scoring or higher. And, that shows something. And I think this team really deserves a shot. And this would be, as I said, like Tennessee, a team that I think would have a prove-it game in a playoff situation where according to our rankings, they would host a playoff game and really kind of show that I think they are a very good team than a lot of people expect. And I'm assuming if it was a playoff game at home, they're doing a whiteout part 2, because why wouldn't you? I mean, they don't lose in whiteout games, it feels like. And I really like this Penn State team, but if they just get a better quarterback in there, I know I love Sean Clifford. He is a little, weary at times, but if he had more consistent play and could be a good game manager and limit his turnovers, then maybe this Penn State team would have beat Michigan or Ohio State, at least one of those two this year, because they were in both of those games going into half, but then struggled in the second half. But they do have a good matchup in the Rose Bowl against Utah.
At number 4, we have Ohio State backing their way into the playoff, getting that USC loss that they needed. We just found out today Jackson Smith and Jigba will not be playing in that playoff game. So that's a big loss for them because I know a lot of their fans, at least, expected that he would be back after they actually made the playoff, but he won't be playing. So it's going to be up to CJ Stroud and Marvin Harrison really to just put on a show against that Georgia defense because I don't see that Ohio State defense giving a ton of resistance. So I think it's going to have to be a shootout if it's going to play into Ohio State's hands. I think they have a chance, but after the way they just got dominated in the second half against Michigan, it's hard to see them pulling it off here. And if they lose this game, it's going to be another disappointing year, and there's going to be a lot of questions surrounding Ryan Day.
At 3, we got TCU staying put even after a loss. And, this was kind of our consensus before any of the games even happened, unless they got obviously blown out. But they get Michigan in the college football playoff. And I really like Max Duggan. I mean, unfortunately, they are going against our Wolverines. And, this would be the team I'd be rooting for if Michigan didn't make it, just because the feel-good story, the Cinderella team that really no one thought would be here. And it's going to be a good matchup, to say the least. But you got to give the Horned Toads, a lot of, what is it, the Hypnotoads? Is that what the
Hypnotoads.
Hypnotoads? Yeah, they got to give the Hypnotoads some credit. Where credit's due here, going 12-0 before the championship game is tough to do. You only see what 2 teams did it before, including them. Obviously, there's 3, but I don't know. It's just tough to rule out this TCU team. I can't be biased here, and say obviously they're going to get destroyed in the bowl game because I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's going to be a different opponent than Michigan's seen all year. They got a gritty quarterback that's willing to really put it on the line no matter what. And I don't think they've really seen a quarterback like that with the weapons around him. Stroud, he's kind of a baby. I'm gonna put that one out there. He's really had Marvin Harrison in a decent run game, but he didn't look like he had that it factor that Duggan has, because Duggan was on his knees, laying in the end zone, gassed. Like you could completely see that he left it all out there. And that's the difference between some good quarterbacks and great quarterbacks. And I think it's going to be the same kind of performance for TCU. And if they're going to win that game, it's going to have to rely on Duggan.
At number 2, we got our Michigan Wolverines. Another dominant second half after a shaky first half. Well, that's how it's been all year. They've just been a second half team who makes adjustments and comes out and wears opponents down. And it was no exception this week. And I know they're missing Blake Corum for the rest of the season, but with this dominant offensive line and the way Donovan Edwards is running the ball, there's not much of a drop off despite how great Corum has been. Donovan Edwards has been running like an animal the last 2 games. And while he's not Blake Corum, pretty close in terms of skill. And obviously, almost anyone could run behind that Michigan offensive line. So I think there's still going to be a dangerous team. I'm going to say that they will beat TCU because obviously I'm picking them. And if they do and they get to Georgia, I think it's going to be much different than last year because Michigan is better than they were last year and Georgia is not as good as they were last year. So who knows what could happen.
And at 1, of course, we got the Georgia Bulldogs, 13-0, really no question here. Their eighth time being here at number 1. Destroyed LSU in the first half. They scored 35 in the first half. And it all kind of started with the blocked field goal for a touchdown that just no one, I guess, decided to play except him. And that kind of set the tone for the game. All momentum was on Georgia's side since that point. And it just felt like LSU had to play catch up. And that's what they had to do in this one. But Stetson Bennett, he's had a good year, but him being one of the 4 finalists for a Heisman candidate, okay, come on. I mean, that's a little stretch there. But, I mean, regardless, Caleb Williams is probably going to win it anyways. The rushing attack for Georgia is killer. And Ohio State, well, they did a good job against Michigan in the first half. But then in the second half, it really struggled. And expect Georgia to have a lot of play action against Ohio State. And I think that's where Georgia's going to come into play because Brock Bowers, I don't even know if most NFL guys could stop him. He's just so dominant, really tall, really physical, tight end or wide receiver, whatever you want to call him. And it's going to be a tough matchup for anyone that has to go against him. But this Georgia team, they deserve this #1 ranking for sure this year. Have really showed it. Besides the Missouri game, other than that, their one faulty game, the Georgia team has really been dominant all year. But that's going to be it for our video today. Make sure you guys come back to see our bowl picks as well, and come back to at the end of the year to see where all these teams rank in our last rankings of the year. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.